Welcome to another episode of Hustle and Grit. My name is Omar.
And my name's Harris.
Figured you'd complete my sentence there.
Oh,
Hasn't been enough episodes yet?
We're not finishing each other's sentences just yet.
So, what are we talking? So, what are we talking about today? How to pick a real estate lawyer. We'll be covering the role, the fees, just general information for you to know about picking a real estate lawyer.
Yeah. So I guess we could branch it off of three topics. It's not going to be too long today. I think we'll be talking for probably maybe 20, 30 minutes. Let's try to keep it in that. Like Umar said, how to pick a lawyer. So like what you should be looking for in a real estate lawyer. What things should you be looking at? What things you shouldn't be looking at? And then what is a role of a real estate lawyer in a real estate transaction? And then what are the fees associated, not just with your real estate legal side, but also just disbursements and other things that are paid on your behalf. So we're going to be talking about that as well.
This episode of A Hustle and Grit, like all the other episodes, is sponsored by Treadstone Law.
Treadstone Law, yes. So
we are a tech-enabled digital law firm. We operate across Ontario. We focus primarily in real estate. However, we do have a corporate tax, wills and estates practice as well. We provide purchase, sale, and refinance services, among others, within the residential real estate market. Really across Ontario, from as far north as Timmins all the way to Thunder Bay, Ottawa, and across the GTA as well.
Yeah. So, and it's all digital, so you'll be doing everything from the comfort of your own home. You can sign everything, all your paperwork from your couch, and it's probably one of the most convenient closings you can find.
If you're selling or refinancing, it's literally a matter of just you signing and then you're just hitting refresh and seeing that money appear in your account. So it's a pretty nice feeling.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we're going to get to that refresh in a bit. But yeah. If check out our website. If you've got an agreement, purchase and sale transaction going on, did I say agreement? If you got a purchase, sale, or a refinance transaction, send us the agreement. We'd be happy to help you out.
The agreement of purchase and sale is on Harris's mind right now because we did a previous episode on the agreement of purchase and sale.
Check that out. So it was a really good one.
Check that out as well, yeah.
It answered a lot of questions that we find a lot. It's very helpful. So if you want to check that out, you can find that. I'll provide it in the link below. The other thing is in our podcast, we are talking about like just different aspects of real estate, we talk about a lot more than real estate, but for this podcast and for a real estate themed podcast, we do talk about different aspects, but we always urge everyone who watches our podcast, if you're interested, if you like what you see, we do have webinars. And in those webinars, we discuss basically a high level of all of the three agreements, per buy, sell, refinance, or what to expect. So basically how to plan your entire transaction. You know what players and what professionals are involved and what roles are involved and how to go about it, so you don't have any surprises in the end. And that's kind of one of the reasons why we're doing this podcast. So or today's topic is so that there's no surprises. So if we jump right in, how do you pick a real estate lawyer?
Very good question. You contact Treadstone Law and
1-844-900-1070. Give us a call.
You have picked your real estate lawyer. So really, I think there's a lot of things to consider. When me and Harris were kind of talking about this topic, we found that there was a lot of different and distinct categories that are very important when selecting the right real estate lawyer. The obvious one is some kind of experience in real estate law. Hopefully within that city as well, because the title defects and zoning issues that you can face in each city are different as well.
Yeah.
So experience, I guess, to kick it off.
Experience.
The first thing to look at is just that they have some experience within real estate law. You're not their first file, I guess is a good way to put it.
And if you are, they have people around them that
are providing
that expertise. So that's incredibly important.
Definitely.
And then they have to be, at least in Ontario, or in Canada, they should be real estate insured. So if you're in Ontario, you should go on to, I think it's the Law Society of Ontario directory for lawyers.
Yep.
You can search their name, and it'll say whether they're real estate insured or not. So they should be insured. You definitely need to check that out.
It'll specifically say real estate insured, yes or no, and then you will know.
But one of the biggest things I would say is people that you can find a lawyer that you can trust. By that, I don't mean that there's lawyers that you can't trust, but what I mean is that you, particularly with your needs and your style of communication, have an easy time communicating with them or the firm, and understanding that real estate transaction, like if there's any issues, you can speak to them in a way where they understand you and you understand them. So trust in just being able to be yourself, right? Because if you're basically barred as a lawyer in Ontario, everybody's taken the bar, right? If you're real estate insured, everybody's insured. Like if you're practicing real estate, you're going to be insured. There's no better kind of insurance and worse kind of insurance. And if you have experience or access to experience, you will have some understanding of that transaction. But the biggest thing is that trust. So being able to speak to your lawyer or anybody at the firm, most often you will be speaking to somebody in the real estate department that's not a lawyer, that's probably helping them put the file together. We've got associates that work with us all the time. You need to be able to talk to anybody in the firm, and they understand what your issue is, and they understand how you communicate. So what I'm saying is not the content, but how you're presenting stuff. They need to be able to figure that out. So you should definitely be trusting them in that sense.
And communication is so important in this process because Harris mentioned how one of the important aspects is their ability to understand how you communicate. But at the same time, you're also going to be working with your mortgage broker if you're buying a house or refinancing, a realtor if you're buying or selling, and then often a number of other people as well, maybe an insurance advisor for your insurance. And all of those people need to be communicating with each other, and they need to be able to kind of provide updates in a timely manner to ensure that everybody's on the same page, and to ensure that if there's any issues coming up, the people that need to know are made aware, and then you're solving those problems together.
Yeah.
So a good lawyer also is providing that open line of communication with the entire real estate team and with you as well.
Yeah.
The lawyer is really, I think, the central hub. They are the middle. They're the pillar that kind of holds everyone together. The reason being, I'll give a good example. When you're buying a house, you're going to your mortgage broker and you go through this process of obtaining this mortgage. The mortgage broker is likely working with the person that's providing an appraisal, or maybe you're working with them directly, and the mortgage broker is working with the bank as well, right? So that group of people is figuring out how to get your mortgage. Now you move on to your real estate agent. Now that real estate agent is now helping you find that house, working with the other real estate agent, the seller. Now you go through that process and get an agreement. Now both of those groups have not probably often communicated at that stage. And then when you get to the last stage, now your lawyer has to bring everything together. Work with your mortgage broker and the bank to get your mortgage. Work with your realtor, the other side's realtor, and the other side's lawyer to help you obtain title. Your lawyer is really the pillar that holds everything together, and that communication is very important when it comes to playing that role.
So your lawyer becomes basically a hub that everybody's kind of feeding into all this information, and they're trying to bring it all together. So that's why communication and you understanding where you are in your transaction and everything is important, and being able to understand that will give you peace of mind, and that's why that communication is very, very important. Now, why I would argue, for example, most clients I find are arguing about, they're trying to find the cheapest lawyer. Why I would argue that's not the best mindset is because I think the difference between, I would argue, okay, from my experience, the most expensive lawyer and the cheapest lawyer, the difference is maybe $100, $200. It's not big at all, at all.
For the
Okay?
majority of lawyers.
Yeah. I mean, if you're buying $500,000 house, $200, I mean, you can't buy anything for $500,000. I think.
Not anymore.
Yeah, in the GTA or in Canada, the average house price is now $700,000. Okay, so if you're buying something for $700,000, right? Like, what's $150, $200 variance is not huge. It's nothing at all. Okay, so
it's something, but in the grand scheme of things, the difference in service that you get when you have a lawyer that is experienced, is able to take on that role, is worth beyond that amount.
And then if you were to pay, I would pay an extra $100, $200 with a lawyer I could trust, right? Like, there's communication there. We're talking. They understand me. I understand them. We're on the same page, as opposed to going, okay, I want to go for somebody who's cheaper, but I don't really understand when they speak and they don't understand when I speak. And this is not necessarily because one is lacking. It's only that sometimes, if I'm speaking English and somebody else comes to me and speaks Cantonese, I'm not going to understand them, no matter how hard I try. I could be the smartest person in the world, and they could be the smartest person in the world, but none of us is going to know what we're talking about because we're not speaking the language, right? So that's why, like, communication is important. I would say that sacrificing that to save $100, $200 is very naive. There's a saying, what is it? Penny wise, pound foolish. So if you're trying to save this, you're going up against this person's managing a $700,000 purchase, let's say, hypothetically speaking. There's probably $500,000 worth of mortgage financing going through his trust account. There's definitely the entire purchase price, less the down payment is going through, plus their land transfer tax, all of that. There's a lot of money going through this person's accounts. You want to understand them. And $100, $200 is the most foolish way to think, okay. But I understand that because that's how people find value. They're looking at value. Perhaps when you're looking for a lawyer, go on their website, right? See if you can understand what's going on in the website. If you can get a hold of them. I know most real estate lawyers will not be looking at booking calls, just because if you're closing a house for $9.99, there's no room for introductory phone calls, unfortunately. That's just how the industry is. But there's other ways where you could see whether this is something that you can understand. Go on their website, see if you can understand their blog posts. Look at videos. If they have videos and you can understand them there, chances are you can understand them in real life, because if you have a lot of videos there, then you're seeing them as they are. Right. And so you can, that's how they're communicating. That's their communication style. Right. So if, for example, you're watching this and you understand 50% of what I'm saying and you want to retain me as your lawyer, please don't. Right. I don't want to retain you either. Right. As a lawyer, it's my kind of job to kind of take in clients that I can work with, right? That can understand me and I can understand them. On the other hand, if you're understanding what I'm saying and you trust what I'm saying, you trust what we're saying, then call us and definitely retain us, because that's where the story kind of begins. You understand where the person is coming from. You understand how they speak. You understand that they have the experience, and then you kind of move forward from there. That's my biggest kind of approach to it. The biggest thing that I see, and that why people actually go for that pricing route, is because I would argue out of this entire situation, the lawyer fees are the fees that, at least for the buyer, come out of their pocket. For the seller, they come out of their pocket too, but there's other fees that come out of their pocket that they don't really see, right? And they feel that this is something that needs to be minimized. And it's because chances are your communication with your lawyer is not as much as with your realtor or as much as with your broker, right? So if you're working with a realtor, you're spending a lot of time buying a house, right? If you're working with a mortgage broker, you're spending a lot of time trying to figure out financing. With a lawyer, they're bringing everything together. You don't see them, so maybe it's out of sight, out of mind type of thing, so you don't feel like there's any value there. But at the same time, you could... The realtor that's helping you buy the property and find a property, very important role. The mortgage broker trying to get you money to buy that property, very important role. But the lawyer who's seeing whether the seller can give you the property is one of the biggest roles there is, because if it goes wrong, then that's not some small sum of money.
That lawyer really has to make sure you're getting title to that house.
Yeah.
That's the main job, and you're obtaining that mortgage. And that's really what you went through that entire process for, obtaining title. And that doesn't just mean putting your name on title. Obtaining title means that you're getting title, and you're also getting title that's free and clear of anything that should not be registered against that title. So buying a house and having a mortgage added to it for $500,000, you bought it for $600,000. You didn't really buy much of a house there, right? You got $100,000 in value. And the lawyer's job is to make sure that charge or that mortgage is removed from title, so you have a clear ownership of title. In line with that, the lawyer is also the person that's your first line of defense. So during the last leg of the process, let's say you're in the last 1 to 2 weeks of closing, and if an issue happens, whether it's related to the mortgage, so there was a financing issue that happened, or it's related to the agreement of purchase and sale. Maybe there's a disagreement on a term that the realtors had it together, right? So the mortgage broker and the realtor were the ones that were kind of taking charge of those processes. Not to say that they're making mistakes, just that these things happen. And when you're in the last 1 to 2 weeks, your lawyer is the first line of defense. Your lawyer has to speak to the right parties. If it's a good lawyer, they also have to speak to the other people that were involved in that process. Reach out to your mortgage broker, get them involved. Reach out to your realtor, get them involved. Speak with the right parties and negotiate a way to solve that problem. So that leads to the next thing. The lawyer should be able to negotiate as well, which is very important. Be able to get what you need and fight for your rights, really, at the end.
Yeah. And I think what you just said, just to back it up just for a second, the fact that if anything goes wrong with the agreement of purchase and sale, the realtor is not going to be jumping in and negotiating. If anything goes wrong with the financing, there's conditions, whatever, it's not the broker who's necessarily going to come in and negotiate. A lot of this stuff, the pushes is going to come, and especially dealing with the other side, is going to come with the lawyer. So that's why it's incredibly important to understand that communication skills, negotiation skills, all of that, you feel confident with the lawyer that you're with. So, and again, this is a serious conversation. So if you feel, for example, listening to us, that we don't have these skills, don't retain us. I'm very clear with that with anybody who kind of comes and prospects the firm. If you don't believe that we can do the work, don't come and come to the firm. If you feel that you can find somebody who is $20 cheaper, 100%, you should take that on if you feel that that's what your priorities are. But if your priorities are just making sure that you're having a painless experience, I would definitely retain us, because we work hard to ensure that you're covered every step of the way.
So we're really making sure that everything is reviewed as much as possible.
Yeah.
And really it goes back to solving those problems. When anything's happening, we're there on the front line. We're making sure that we're negotiating with the other side, which leads to something too, which I think one of our strong points for both Harris and I think that when you're picking a real estate lawyer, you don't want to pick someone that's either too aggressive or too passive. Right. This relates to the subjective or the personality elements.
Yeah.
The reason that I strongly recommend this is because when there's an issue that comes that arises in your transaction, your lawyer has to make sure that they're advocating for your rights. But if they're too passive, then they're not going to be advocating as they should. Right. You're not going to be getting the result that you deserve. If they're too aggressive, then you're kind of isolating the other party, and there's no discussion being had with the seller's lawyer, the buyer's lawyer, whomever the other side is. And then it doesn't lead to a solution either. Right now, there's more emotions involved and people are angry, and there's just no solution being arrived at. And then you don't get what you want. You want that balance between that aggression and that kind of passive outlook where you're able to make a good result or negotiate a good deal. You
want the middle road, right? You don't want to be swinging too far to one side, definitely. Also, I would argue, in order to pick a lawyer, you're also looking at just their mannerisms. I personally, when I look at, and a good example is if you want to go and have a surgery done. First of all, I'm not going to go for the cheapest doctor, right? Because there's a lot on the line here. What's on the line here? Your health is on the line here, right? So I'm not going to go for that. But again, I'm going to look at their mannerisms. I'm going to look at, are they sociable? Can they understand what I'm saying? I could have another doctor who's really good, right? Just as good as the doctor in front of me. But if I have to pay more because that doctor will understand me better, just because we're on the same page, I will pick the one where I have to pay more, because when something goes wrong, I want to be able to communicate with this person, and they need to really understand what I'm saying. So that's the other thing. With doctors and even with lawyers, you're not, this is my perspective, you're not necessarily paying them to get the job done, which you are definitely, but you're also paying them to handle it in case something goes wrong. They're also your contingency plan, right? So if there's a last minute request, if there's something that was unforeseen that pops up, you want to be able to have the confidence that your lawyer is going to handle that, no matter what's kind of thrown their way, no matter if it's the 11th hour, whatever it is, you should definitely be able to have that confidence that this person is going to take care of it.
Well said.
The other thing is if you hire, do not hire a lawyer and then not trust them and kind of look over their shoulder to see whether they're doing the job right or wrong. I mean, if when I get a client who's constantly like looking over my shoulder, not to say that there's no reporting and that they should know where the transaction's at, but once they start telling me how to do my job, right, and I would like to think I've got the experience, I will let them know, hey, listen, like if you want to proceed with my services, you got to trust me with what I'm doing, right? You got to trust that I've seen this, and you see one side of it. I've seen every option or possibility here, so I am hedging for a lot of different things which you may think don't exist, right? Because in your frame of mind, there's only one thing. So that's one thing that I definitely want to like get across, where once you pick your lawyer, let them do the work then.
It's not to say that you won't be making any decisions, you won't be involved. You have to trust the lawyer will do their job when they're supposed to do their job.
Yeah.
And part of their job is to make sure that they're coming to you when there's an important decision to be made that you have to make. So sometimes there's decisions that you don't have to make that are just part of the process, where things that we have to do. You trust us. Let the lawyer complete that task. Now, when it comes time to coming to you for guidance, we are legally obligated to come to you and seek your guidance. An example could be, let's say say you're selling a house and the buyer is requesting an extension. Maybe they have a very emotional story about why they can't close that day, and they want to close the next day. And it's a really touching story. Someone passed away. Someone close to them passed away. We can't just emotionally say, okay, oh, your grandma passed away. Okay, sorry, you can close the next day. Don't worry about it. We have to come to you. We have to ask you, is it okay for you to extend? Should we extend, and should we ask for damages? Are you okay with not asking for damages? So we go over and provide you all of your rights, what the situation is, what the request is, and what your options are, and then we let you make that decision.
And the other thing is, to add to that, if they come to you directly, then I would definitely like speak to the lawyer. Like all my clients, I tell them, if the buyer comes to you and says, hey, I want an extension, get them to contact us and not contact you, and then the client and us will discuss what their options are, what they can do, what their possibilities is, so all of that.
Yeah, so it's important. I think we've seen a few times where clients thought, okay, the seller came to me, the buyer came to me, I can make a deal right here. Yeah. Always call your lawyer. Yeah. Understand your rights, understand what you're signing, what you're giving up, understand what you're taking on.
Yeah, because even if you say something, you could go into a bind, like you can bind yourself and the buyer or the other party to these new terms, even if you were to say it and you're like, oh, you know what, I didn't think it was going to be that serious. So that's incredibly important. So that's why it's important when they're coming in to just be like, okay, I want to go to my lawyer. But anyway, so that first portion was supposed to be how to pick a lawyer. Okay. Second one is the role of the lawyer, right? And I think we've discussed this a little bit. And the reason we wanted to discuss this, and I know we said 20 to 30 minutes was the length of this podcast, but we're going a little bit over, which is fine. So I said, the the role of this lawyer, the reason why this is really important to me is because you see often enough actively what a realtor is doing, because and not all parts of their job are apparent, but a lot of their stuff is. When they're bringing you to a house, they're there with you. You're signing the offers that they've created. All of this stuff, you're there, so you see what's happening. With mortgage brokers, again, some extent it's hidden, right? Because they are doing a lot of stuff in the background trying to find lenders, but you still get to see a lot because they're asking you for information, they're talking to you, they're trying to find your financial condition. There is a lot of back and forth. With lawyers, often enough, it is not a lot of back and forth until something goes wrong. And then you really get to know your lawyer if he's good, right? And that does not mean that they're not doing any work. They're just doing work behind the scenes.
In fact, often before you have your first conversation with your lawyer, sometimes first full conversation with a team or any kind of communication where you see that progress has been made, the lawyers or the lawyer and the law office has been working for some time already. A good example is sometimes clients will come to us. They'll say, hey, we want to retain your services. Here's my agreement of purchase and sale. And then they kind of disappear. The lawyer disappears. And then the lawyer is reviewing title behind the scenes. The lawyer is doing a ton of other work behind the scenes, preparing documents. But the clients haven't heard from them yet because they think that everything's going to happen on closing day or closer to it.
Yeah.
So I guess the point here is that there's a lot of work being done behind the scenes before often you even speak to your lawyer in depth or have a chance to.
Yeah, I mean, often enough, for the buyer's side, requisitions are done. Buyers don't even know what's happening, right? Unless there's an issue. Again, unless there's an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Sellers, same thing. There's responses to requisitions. The buyer's lawyer may be asking for things that they don't have a right to ask. You're going and you're speaking to them and you're saying, no, this is not going to happen. We're not going to be forwarding you this or that or whatever, right? Because you don't have to. But the seller doesn't know. It's not until, like, for example, the buyers say, hey, I don't care if this is not my right. I'm still not going to, I still need A, B, and C, and we're not closing. Then it's like, all right, we got to go to our client and let them know that, hey, this is not their right. So these are your, what you can do. This is what your options are. This is what will happen as a result of that. These are your costs, or this is your, whatever it is, whatever those options are, that's when we kind of push it forward. And that's when people are like, okay, well, now I see them, they must have done some work, right? There's that. There's also, how are you registered on title, right? When your mortgage is going on title, to ensure to make that charge is done correctly, right? To ensure that how you're put on property, the transfer of title is done correctly. I know that again, it's out of sight, out of mind, but when the funds are being transferred on that day of the close, the law firm is like, we're on top of things. We know, for example, we're waiting for funds, right? If you're a seller, we're requesting from the other side, from the buyers, when are these funds coming in? We're on top of it, right? And as soon as they come in, that's when we can transfer title. And we don't do it until the funds come into our account before they're cleared. Then we make sure that all of our charges and registrations and everything is done correctly, so that there's no mistakes in the future. And that's when you go in and you say, okay, everything is done, and you tell your client, hey, congratulations. But as a client, are going to be going, oh my God, what's going on? What's taking so long? What's happening, right? And then when it happens, you're like, hey, this is great news. But you don't see all that running around that's happening in the back end.
To step back a bit, so on closing day, usually you've already signed your documents with your lawyer.
Yeah.
And your lawyer has already told you that this is the amount I need from you for closing. Your lawyer has already submitted all of the documents to the other side and the lender or the bank's office as well. So really everything that's happening on closing day is everything's kind of coming together. You're getting the money from the lender and we're forwarding funds, or if you're a seller, you're confirming receipt, and then you're transferring title. So there's different stages of this entire process. I think we can kind of do a high-level overview of what's going on. So the first stage you have, it's before the requisition date. So that's on your agreement of purchase and sale. It's your title search date. That is the date, the deadline for the buyer's lawyer to send to the seller's lawyer a list of things on title that they want removed, resolved, or more information about, whatever they need. And then at that stage, then the seller's lawyer is going back to the buyer's lawyer. There's the back and forth that Harris was talking about, where they're removing what needs to be removed or receiving what needs to be received, I guess more likely. And both sides are being satisfied for what they've requested. And then after that, you have, from a buyer's lawyer's perspective, you're preparing the mortgage documents, and then you're also preparing the transfer documents. From a seller's lawyer's perspective, preparing all the transfer documents and getting everything ready. Then you sign, whether you're buyer or seller, then you sign, and then the last leg of the race starts. So the buyer's lawyer is going to be submitting everything to the bank and then sending everything to whoever it needs to be sent to. Seller's lawyer, another caveat is they need enough time to be able to contact your current mortgage lender and obtain a discharge statement from them. So they have all the numbers and everything ready to pay off your mortgage and get all of that solved. And then the day that Harris mentioned, the closing day, all of those things happen. I'm not going to go over them again. All those things happen. And then following closing, now the seller's lawyer has a little bit more to do, where they're going to be making sure that the mortgage is paid off and obtaining a discharge of that mortgage and then forwarding it to the buyer's lawyer side.
So what a lot of sellers don't realize, right, is that when you're as a seller's lawyer, the law firm gives an undertaking that the law firm is responsible and essentially held liable to pay off the mortgage proceeds of the seller. So it's no longer just the seller's risk. It becomes the law firm, specifically the lawyer on your file's risk and their responsibility to pay off that mortgage, because they will be held responsible, not just the seller. The seller will be as well, but the lawyer will be as well as to why or when or how the mortgage proceeds were paid off. So they have to be paid off by the law firm. That's incredibly important, which is, again, something that people don't see, but that's a huge responsibility on the law firm side, because it's not like we're undertaking to pay off, a small credit card or anything like that. This is like a $500, $600, $1 million mortgage liability that's on the law firm's head. Now, the thing is a lot of clients will look at this, and even though I'll explain it to them, they don't understand. They'll be like, well, you know what, the mortgage hasn't been paid off. I don't see it updated on my account. Sometimes it takes up to some time for the bank to process it, update it on your records. But that be put aside, we have a vested interest as your lawyer, as your law firm, to make sure that mortgage is paid off. Believe me, I want to pay it off faster than the client does, because I don't want it hanging over my head, right? So it's just as much the responsibility and the liability of the lawyer as it is the client to pay off that mortgage. So that's the role, okay? Now let's jump to the fees. I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, and I think that there's a lot to be, not a lot, there's a decent amount to be spoken about, and it's a good conversation to have. Now, fees
means more than just lawyer fees. So I guess we could use the term closing costs, maybe.
Closing costs, yeah.
Because
a lot of times, for example, when somebody comes to us, they'll be like, what are your fees? And we'll say, and they're all posted online, those are our fees plus disbursements, right? And they'll say, okay, well, what are disbursements? Disbursements, and we're going to go over this right now, and I'll tell you exactly why they're difficult to kind of pinpoint. It's because disbursements are all these expenses that the law firm actually pays on your behalf to complete this entire transaction. Okay, so one good disbursement, if you're a buyer, you're doing title search. Title search is something, and again, these fees are on our website too, so you'll go check those out. It's the land registry charges us to pull title, and it's not a flat fee. It depends on how many pages there are to the title search, right? So that's something that we can't really predict. That's a disbursement made on your behalf. If you're a seller, how the bank wants a discharge will depend on what the disbursements are. Let's say your bank, sometimes banks say, hey, listen, you have to courier a check to our head office in Alberta. You have that often enough. And by the way, we're not going to discharge this mortgage. You are. and you're going to take it off title. So those are things that are out of our hands. That's going to increase your disbursements right away, because discharging a mortgage is normally what a bank does themselves. So when they say we have to do it, now there's other disbursements involved, other fees involved. Whereas another bank might just say, hey, listen, you can wire to our account, right? And that's it. So all we're doing is paying for a wire fee. That's the disbursement. Whereas with the other one, not only are you paying courier fees, you're paying fees, or you're increasing your interest or per diem, because that check is not going to arrive the next day. We have to now go send somebody to the bank. They have to certify a check. Then we have to move it, mail it forward or courier it forward. So those increased disbursements, that is something that we can't. I mean, if I wish I had a crystal ball, but we cannot predict what your bank is going to request from us. And it's not something that we can say, hey, listen, no, I'm going to pay you the way I want to pay you. We have to listen to them. And believe me, again, it's my incentive to get this paid off as quickly as possible without any hiccups. And cheaply as possible, because the longer you extend it, the more interest there is. So and it's only discharged when everything's been paid off. So again, it's our interest to pay that off as quickly as possible. Those are things that we can't control. Title insurance, that's completely up to your property, and the title insurance company. I mean, especially if you're buying or refinancing, the lender will say take up in title insurance on our behalf. It's not up to us to decide, whether we want it or not. We go to the insurer and we say, okay, we need title insurance, and whatever price they give us, we have to pay that.
So your bank, most like, or 99.100% probably of the time, will have a condition that we will not give this mortgage to this person unless their title insurance policy is obtained on our behalf.
Mm-hmm. And so that's a disbursement that we can't. I mean, I'm not a insurance underwriter to know like what your house is what that premium is going to be. So that's the other thing. There's registration costs. Those are a bit more predictable. I think it's $77.62. So exactly. Yeah, exactly. So though, but then again, let's say your bank wants to put in an assignment of rents on there, and there's other, like, those registration fees as a whole. I could tell you it costs $77, roughly almost $78, to register something on title. But then if they want to register more things on title, that's going to increase your disbursements. It depends then on your bank, right? Now, all of this back end, actually, to be honest, we're going to have another podcast talking about mortgages and fees and all of that, because a lender could have a cheaper interest rate, but the way they conduct their business and how they want to go on title could be more expensive, which you may want to look at, like, okay, maybe you pay a little bit more on the interest, and if somebody's more simpler in terms of how they're going on title, it could save you money, but that's a different discussion. Point here is disbursements are something that are not under our control. Again, we're listening to a lot of other parties and trying to get things done. When you are a buyer or when you're refinancing, as a lawyer, we're not representing just the borrower or the buyer. We're also representing the bank. So we have to listen to them as well and what they're instructing us. That's one of, like, the few places where you don't have to have the same or different lawyers just to bring that cost down. But bringing that cost down, because if both parties have lawyers, the cost to take out a mortgage is going to get higher. That means that we also have to listen to whatever the bank is saying, because they're our client as well when you're refinancing and when you're borrowing or refinancing or buying. So those disbursements are, again, largely, I mean, they're out of our hands. It's not like we don't we don't create disbursements for the fun of it. I'm not going to courier your checks to a different country and get it back just to push up your courier costs. It's going to go directly to the bank. But what those costs are, I can't tell. I mean, if somebody knows how to in advance, I mean, I would love to hear it.
What about you have Land transfer tax. Did we cover that?
Land transfer tax we didn't cover, but that's fairly straightforward. That cost, I mean, you could go online and find that out. It's based off of your purchase price. There's a tax rate.
There's a few things I think to note. I mean, it's based off the purchase price. If you're in Toronto, it's double anywhere else in Ontario because you have your municipal portion and then you have your provincial portion.
Yeah.
And then first-time home buyers get credit $4,000. So that's automatically deducted on closing. So if you are a first-time home buyer, make sure you tell your lawyer right away, I'm a first-time home buyer, so that they can make sure that that's entered into title and you receive that deduction. If you forget to, it's okay. You can always get a refund afterwards, but then that just involves more paperwork and then a wait time as well. So it's important for you to tell your lawyer as soon as possible so you can get that deduction. If you're in Toronto, you get that twice, one for the province, one for the city. So that's an $8,000 deduction max.
I mean, it's our firm policy that we don't push through. So normally, if you're a first-time home buyer, if your lawyer doesn't put that into the system, let's say hypothetically speaking, your land transfer tax was $10,000, you're going to pay that $10,000, and then you're going to wait for the rebate of the $4,000 to come back. Our firm policy is to register while you're registering on title. Let them know this is your first-time home buyer, and that that $4,000 you have a deduction, and so we don't push forward the $10,000. We will push forward the $6,000. So it brings down the tax you're putting.
Let
forward.
us know. Make sure you let.
So you do need to let us know ahead of time. Again, we do send out like an intro email and we ask you questions, but if you don't answer it, we're going to assume that you're not, because that's a default registration. So you need to let us know that you're a first-time home buyer.
Okay, so that covers, so you said disbursements, legal fees, land transfer tax. I think that covers...
that covers everything. I think we've covered everything. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about closing costs, something to consider are the adjustments. So as a buyer, you're getting the statement of adjustments that kind of tells you what the adjustments are to the closing price. So basically what that means is, let's say you have property tax that the seller paid for the whole year, but you're buying the house halfway through the year, then you owe the seller the amount for the second half of the year that you'll be owning the house. So the reason that's important is because then that will drive up your total closing costs. Maybe you had a number in mind that this is exactly how much it will be. Okay, I got my lawyer amount. This is exactly what it should be. There is that variance as well. And sometimes that adjustment can be a couple of grand, right? So that can add to the cost.
Yeah, and sometimes people are surprised, like, oh, I didn't see this coming. So, because it could push your purchase, your price. It's not pushing your purchase price; it's pushing your adjustments up $1,000. But it's not like you're going to get a higher mortgage. So I'll give you an example. Let's say the seller, you're buying a property, and the seller decided they had paid $1,000 more than they had to for land or their property tax. Sorry. So that's going to bump up the price in the statement of adjustments by $1,000. What that means is, let's say you bought the house for $500,000. With the adjustment of that $1,000, you will have to give to the seller $501,000. So the purchase price plus the $1,000 that they paid extra in their property taxes. However, your lender is not going to take that into account when they're giving you a mortgage. So if they're giving you 80% of the purchase price, they're not going to give you 80% of $501,000. They're going to give you 80% of $500,000. So that adjustment, you have to finance 100% out of pocket.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So those are the fees. What are the takeaways? Quickly, what are the takeaways of this conversation?
I guess how to pick a real estate lawyer. We said experience, someone who is able to negotiate.
Communication
is key. The ability to communicate with you and your ability to understand them.
Mm-hmm. Trust.
Trust is very key. You need to be able to trust your lawyer. What else?
Yeah, that was it. So it was basically really communication, trust, and what you shouldn't be looking at is whether you're going to be saving $20. You should really be focusing in on
even $100, $200.
I mean, $100, $200, yeah. And vast majority, like, there's not a huge difference between the pricing of real estate lawyers from what I've seen. There isn't a huge difference. If there is a difference, it's like from the cheapest to the most expensive, maybe $100, $200.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
it's very small.
so this is off the top of my head. I would be surprised even if it was 200. It's probably around $100, right?
But what the moral is, I guess, that you have to understand that you're not just hiring someone who's transferring title. There's so much involved,
Yeah.
right? They are the kind of the pillar that holds the entire process together. Everyone connects through them, and they're the first line of defense when there's any issues that come up. They have to make sure that your rights are protected.
Yeah.
They have to make sure that you get what you deserve at the end.
Yeah, so they're not only like policing on your behalf the entire transaction, but they're your first line of defense when anything goes wrong. They're their first and some like often off the only line of defense when anything goes wrong.
And when things go wrong, that can be costly.
It does.
And if the lawyer is not kind of fighting for your rights effectively, it can be more costly, right? Or you might end up having lost paying adjustments, penalties when you didn't have to at the end.
Yeah,
right.
So so definitely consider all of that. We went through the role, what a lawyer did, and then we also spoke about fees. Again, fees. We talked about disbursements, how there's legal fee and there's a disbursement side. Again, the reason why the disbursement side was so important, I had one time a client come in and they said, like I had like a previous lawyer, they quoted us one thing and then the bill was like so high, you're not going to screw us over like that, right? And I was like, what do you mean? And when I started speaking to them, they were referring to disbursements. And I was like, this is kind of the industry standard. I'm not going to talk to how your previous lawyer behaved, right? But there's a legal fee side and there's a disbursement side. The disbursement side naturally is something that those are fees being paid on your behalf. And I mean, if a lawyer does not charge you for the disbursements, most fees that a lawyer makes are less than even the disbursements, so they'll be out of pocket as they work for you. So that's something to consider. There's a fee and a disbursement side. One final notice. We went through a lot of the stuff today. We do have webinars. Check out our webinars. It's hosted by yours truly, me and Umar.
One on each type of transaction, one on the purchase, the sale, the refinance. We have live webinars. You get to ask questions and really understand the entire process for each of those transactions. You're understanding what each of the professionals do, what your realtor does, what your mortgage broker does, what your real estate lawyer does. You're understanding what their responsibilities are, and most importantly, what's your responsibility, what's expected from you in each stage of the process. And that really allows you to avoid mistakes, make the right decisions, reduce a lot of stress, and just save money at the end.
Yep. Yeah. That sounds good. Well, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for joining us.
Take care.
Take care.